They thought they knew what monsters looked like. For 3,000 years, the Galactic Council had cataloged every predator species, every apex hunter, every creature that stalked through the darkness of a million worlds. They had faced the crystalline hive minds of Zarian Prime, survived the planet-eating swarms of the Void Locusts, and even negotiated peace with the psychic parasites of the Nightmare Nebula. But they had never encountered anything quite like the small bipedal creatures from the third planet of an unremarkable yellow star. The humans seemed so ordinary. Soft skin, no natural weapons, no psychic abilities, no advanced technology when first discovered. Just curious, chattering primates who painted pictures on cave walls and told stories around fires. The Council's xenobiologists classified them as harmless herbivores with minor omnivorous tendencies. Their military strategists marked them as negligible threat level. Their diplomats noted them as potentially useful for manual labor. When the hegemony decided to clear the Sol system for mining operations, they expected no resistance from the primitive humans. It was supposed to be a simple extermination, quick, clean, efficient. After all, what could barely spacefaring mammals do against weapons that could crack planets and fleets that blotted out stars? But as the last human colony ship vanished into the depths of space, carrying the final survivors of a murdered species, something awakened in humanity that the galaxy had never seen before. Not the cold calculation of machines, not the instinctual fury of predators, but something far more terrifying. The methodical, patient, utterly relentless wrath of beings who had spent their entire evolution learning to kill the unkillable and survive the unsurvivable. The hegemony thought they had eliminated a pest problem. Instead, they had just created the galaxy's first truly apex predator. And now, 10 years later, as alien worlds burn and hegemony fleets disappear without trace, the galaxy is beginning to understand a simple truth that humanity learned long ago on their small blue world: the most dangerous monsters are the ones that don't look like monsters at all. Admiral Zekdar of the Hegemony Third Fleet stood before the holographic display, his forearms crossed behind his chitinous back as he watched the final moments of Earth's destruction. The planet cracked like an egg, its molten core spilling into space in brilliant orange streams. Another successful pacification mission for the glory of the hegemony. Status report, he clicked in his native tongue, mandibles spreading in what passed for satisfaction among his kind. Approximately 8 billion indigenous life forms eliminated, sir, reported his tactical officer, a slender Vorthan whose pale skin shimmered with bioluminescent patterns. Orbital bombardment was 97% effective. The remaining settlements were eliminated by targeted plasma strikes. And the survivors? Long-range sensors detected 17 escape vessels. Primitive fusion drives, no FTL capability detected. They won't get far, Admiral. Perhaps a few light years at most before their systems fail. Zektar's mandibles clicked again, this time in dismissal. Let them run. A few thousand refugees scattered across the void would pose no threat to the hegemony's expansion. The humans had shown no exceptional capabilities during the brief conflict. Their weapons were crude, their ships slow, their tactics predictable. They had fought bravely, he would grant them that, but bravery meant nothing against superior technology and overwhelming force. Begin mining operations, he ordered. The Council wants this system stripped and productive within the standard year. As the massive hegemony dreadnoughts moved into position around Earth's corpse, none of them noticed the small sensor probe that had been silently recording everything from the edge of the system. None of them detected the encrypted burst transmission that shot into hyperspace, carrying the last testament of a dead world to its scattered children. 3 light years away, aboard the refugee ship New Horizon, Captain Sarah Chen watched the transmission with tears streaming down her weathered face. Around her, the survivors of humanity, soldiers, scientists, children, elderly, crowded into the cramped bridge to witness their home's final moments. "Ma'am," whispered her communications officer, Lieutenant Torres, "we're receiving similar feeds from the other ships. Everyone's seeing this." Joe, wiping her eyes. She had been a combat pilot before the invasion, had flown missions against the Hegemony Scouts when they first appeared in the outer system. She had watched good people die, had seen cities vaporized by weapons that turned matter into energy with terrifying efficiency. But this, seeing Earth itself murdered, this was something different. "Captain," called out Dr. Charcoal. Elizabeth Warren, the expedition's chief xenobiologist. The older woman's voice was steady, but her hands shook as she clutched a datapad. "I need to show you something. About them. About what they really are." Sarah gestured for the doctor to approach. Warren had spent years studying the intercepted hegemony communications, learning their language, understanding their culture. If anyone knew their enemy, it was her. "They're not explorers," Warren said quietly, her voice carrying across the silent bridge. "They're not even conquerors in the traditional sense. They're exterminators. The data we captured from their databases, the communications we've decoded. Captain, this isn't the first time. Earth isn't the first world they've destroyed." Right, projecting a 3D star chart into the air. Red markers dotted the display, hundreds of them, each representing a dead world. The Kethari Archipelago, 47 worlds, 15 billion beings. Eliminated for mining efficiency. The Sorth Collective, 12 worlds, 8 billion beings, destroyed for agricultural development. The Yilin Republic, 19 worlds, 23 billion beings, erased for strategic resources. Warren's voice grew harder with each name. And now Sol, now us. A young ensign, barely out of the academy, raised his hand hesitantly. "Dr. Warren, how many species have they?" 67 confirmed genocides, Warren replied flatly. "And those are just the ones we have records for. The hegemony has been doing this for over 3,000 years, moving from system to system, species to species, always taking what they need and leaving nothing behind." The bridge fell silent except for the hum of life support systems and the distant rumble of the fusion engines. Sarah stared at the red markers, each one representing billions of dead beings, entire civilizations reduced to mining operations and agricultural projects. "Captain," said her first officer, Commander Jackson Park, "what are your orders?" Sarah looked around the bridge at the faces of her people. She saw grief, yes, but something else was building behind their eyes, something cold and patient and utterly implacable. She recognized it because she felt it growing in her own chest, replacing the hot tears with something far more dangerous. "Dr. Warren," she said slowly, "in your studies of the hegemony, have you found any record of them facing organized resistance? Any species that fought back effectively?" Warren shook her head. "None. They're too powerful, too advanced. Most species surrender after the first demonstration of their weapons. Those that fight, well, you've seen what happens to those that fight. But we're not most species, are we, Doctor?" Something in Sarah's tone made Warren look up sharply. "Captain, humans have been killing things bigger and stronger than ourselves since we climbed down from the trees. We hunted mammoths with pointed sticks. We fought wars against machine guns with cavalry charges. We put men on the moon with computers less powerful than our wristwatches." Sarah's voice grew stronger, carrying across the bridge. "And when someone hits us, we don't just hit back. We hit back harder." She turned to face the assembled crew, and when she spoke, her voice carried the iron authority of someone who had already made an unbreakable decision. "The hegemony thinks they've eliminated a pest problem. They think they can move on to their next target and forget we ever existed. They're wrong." She gestured at the star chart, at the hundreds of red markers representing murdered worlds. "We're going to teach them what real monsters look like." Commander Park stepped forward. "Captain, with respect, we have 17 ships and maybe 50,000 people. They have fleets that span the galaxy." "They have fleets," Sarah agreed, "but we have something they don't have. Something they've never faced before." She smiled, and it was not a pleasant expression. "We have absolutely nothing left to lose." Over the next several hours, as the refugee ships slowly accelerated away from their dead homeworld, Sarah Chen began to implement what would later be known as the Exodus Protocol. It was not a plan for survival, it was a plan for revenge. The first phase was information. Every ship's computer was loaded with everything humanity had learned about the hegemony during the brief war. Ship designs, weapon specifications, fleet movements, political structures, economic systems, everything. More importantly, they began to analyze the data Dr. Warren had compiled about the hegemony's previous genocides, looking for patterns, weaknesses, anything that could be exploited. The second phase was resources. The refugee ships might be primitive by galactic standards, but they carried the accumulated knowledge of an entire species. Scientists, engineers, soldiers, doctors, artists, philosophers, the survivors represented the best of humanity, the ones deemed valuable enough to save when the end came. The third phase was the most crucial, dispersal. Sarah ordered the 17 ships to split up, each taking a different vector into the galaxy's spiral arms. They would establish hidden bases, build new ships, recruit allies from among the surviving species, and most importantly, they would learn. "We're not going to fight them like humans," Sarah explained to her senior staff as they planned their routes. "We're going to fight them like the monsters they've created. Patient, methodical, utterly relentless." Dr. Warren pulled up another section of her research, this one showing hegemony patrol routes and shipping lanes. Their empire is vast, but it's also stretched thin. They rely on routine, on the assumption that their enemies will fight conventionally. They've never faced an enemy that could adapt, that could learn from defeat. "What are you suggesting, Doctor?" asked Commander Park. "I'm suggesting that we stop thinking like the species that built cities and wrote poetry and reached for the stars," Warren said quietly, "and start thinking like the species that survived ice ages and asteroid impacts and every extinction event our world could throw at us."
Lieutenant Torres, the communications officer, looked up from her console.
"They're ready to disperse on your command." Sarah nodded, taking one last look at the tactical display showing Earth's cooling remains. Somewhere out there, hegemony mining ships were already beginning to strip away the debris, harvesting the heavy metals and rare elements that had once formed her homeworld. "All ships," she broadcast on the refugee fleet's encrypted channel, "this is Admiral Chen." The promotion was self-appointed, but no one questioned it. "In 1 hour, we will execute the Exodus Protocol. You have your targets, your objectives, your timeline. From this moment forward, we are no longer refugees. We are no longer the victims of genocide." She paused, thinking of the billions who had died, of the children who would never grow up, of the dreams and hopes and futures that had been vaporized with Earth's cities. "We are the instruments of retribution. We are the nightmare that will haunt their sleep for the next 1,000 years. And we will not stop, we will not rest, we will not forgive, until every last one of them understands what it means to be afraid." The transmission ended, and the 17 ships began to separate, their courses diverging like the spokes of a vast wheel. Within a few hours, they would be scattered across light-years of space, invisible to hegemony sensors, carrying their cargo of survivors and rage into the dark. Admiral Zektar, still overseeing the mining operations around Earth's remains, never knew that humanity's real war against the hegemony had just begun. He never knew that scattered among the stars were 50,000 humans who had learned the most dangerous lesson any species could learn: that they had nothing left to lose and everything to avenge. The hegemony had committed many genocides in their long history, but they had never faced the survivors of their own cruelty. They had never encountered a species that could take the worst possible loss and transform it into the most patient, methodical, utterly implacable hatred the galaxy had ever seen. They were about to learn. 5 years after the fall of Earth, the Hegemony patrol cruiser Dominant Truth glided through the Kepler Nebula on what should have been a routine inspection run. Captain Vexhol, a veteran officer of the Hegemony Navy, reviewed the morning's sensor reports with casual indifference. Nothing but asteroids, cosmic dust, and the occasional gas pocket worth harvesting. "Contact ahead," announced his sensor operator, a young hegemony conscript whose scale still bore the bright patterns of youth. "Metallic signature, approximately 2,000 kilometers off our starboard bow." Vexel's attention sharpened. Unauthorized vessels in hegemony space were rare and usually indicated either pirates or smugglers. Both were dealt with in the same manner: complete annihilation. "Visual confirmation," he ordered. The main screen flickered to life, showing what appeared to be a damaged cargo hauler drifting dead in space. Its hull was scarred with weapons fire and micrometeorite impacts, and it showed no energy signatures. A standard derelict, probably abandoned after a pirate attack. "Sir," called the communications officer, "we're receiving a distress beacon." Automated transmission, repeating in 17 languages including trade standard. "They're requesting assistance." Vexul's mandibles clicked in annoyance. Salvage operations were tedious, but regulations required investigation of all distress calls. The hegemony's image as protector of galactic commerce had to be maintained, even in remote sectors like this one. "Boarding party," he commanded. "Standard, sweep, and scuttle. If there's anything valuable, catalog it for transfer." 20 minutes later, Security Chief Corvin led a squad of 6 Marines aboard the derelict vessel. Their environmental suits were state-of-the-art hegemony military hardware, equipped with advanced sensors and weapons systems that could handle anything from armed resistance to biological hazards. "Ship appears to be of Altyrian registry," Corvin reported through the comlink. "Cargo manifest indicates farming equipment bound for the Outer Rim colonies." "Hold on." There was a pause as the boarding party moved deeper into the ship. "Sir, we're detecting life signs. Faint but definitely organic. Looks like there might be survivors after all." On the bridge of the dominant truth, Vexel considered this development. Survivors meant witnesses, and witnesses meant potential intelligence about pirate activities in the sector. It might even mean rewards from grateful merchants or colonial governments. "Investigate," he ordered, "but maintain caution. Could be a trap." The boarding party moved through the derelict's corridors, their suit lights cutting through the darkness. The ship had clearly seen better days. Emergency lighting flickered sporadically, and there were signs of hasty repairs throughout the vessel. "Life signs are getting stronger," reported one of the Marines. "Looks like they're coming from the main cargo bay." Corvin led the way, weapon ready as his squad approached the sealed bay doors. The metal had been damaged, probably during whatever attack had left the ship drifting, and someone had welded crude patches over the worst breaches. "Cutting through," Corvin announced, activating his plasma torch. The door began to glow red-hot as the Marine cut a rough entrance. What they found inside changed everything. The cargo bay had been converted into a makeshift refugee camp. Dozens of beings from various species huddled together in improvised shelters made from cargo containers and ship components. They were thin, clearly malnourished, but alive. Men, women, children. The survivors of what looked like a recent conflict. "Please," called out an elderly Kithari female, her feathers dulled with exhaustion and fear. "We are not pirates, we are refugees. Our colony was attacked by raiders. This ship found us drifting in escape pods and took us aboard." Corvin lowered his weapon slightly. Refugees were common in this part of space, especially with the increase in pirate activity over the past few years. Standard protocol was to transport them to the nearest hegemony processing station, where they would be sorted and relocated to appropriate facilities. "How many of you are there?" he asked in trade standard. 43, replied the Cathari, "men, women, children from 6 different species. We have been traveling for weeks, looking for safe harbor." It was then that Corvin noticed the human. The being stood near the back of the group, unremarkable at first glance. Bipedal, average height, with the pale skin and dark hair common to several species. But something about the way it moved, the way it positioned itself between the Marines and the refugee children, set off Corvin's instincts. "You," he said, pointing at the human. "Identification." The human stepped forward slowly, hands visible and empty. "My name is Marcus Webb. I'm a cargo handler from the Altyrian Shipping Company. I was on duty when we found these people. Corven studied the human through his suit's enhanced optics. The being appeared harmless enough, but there was something about its eyes that bothered him. They were too calm, too alert for someone who had supposedly been through a traumatic experience. "Sir," came Vexhol's voice through the comm. "What's your status?" 43 refugees of mixed species, Corvin reported. "Ship appears to have been converted for passenger transport, requesting instructions." There was a pause as the captain considered the situation. Refugees were typically processed through official channels, but the nearest hegemony station was 3 days away. The dominant truth wasn't equipped for extended passenger transport. "Bring them aboard for temporary holding," Vexhol decided. "We'll transfer them to Station Gamma." As the Marines began organizing the refugees for transport, Marcus Webb approached Corven with a respectful demeanor. "Sir," he said quietly, "some of these people are injured. Do you have medical facilities aboard your ship?" "Bah." Corvin nodded. "Our medic can treat minor injuries." "Thank you," Webb replied. "And, sir, some of the children are frightened. Would it be possible for a few of us to stay with them during the transfer? To help keep them calm?" The request seemed reasonable, even compassionate. Corvin found himself approving of the human's concern for the younger refugees. "I'll speak to the captain." An hour later, the refugees were aboard the Dominant Truth, settled into converted cargo holds that had been hastily equipped with basic life support and temporary bedding. The ship's small medical bay was busy treating minor injuries and malnutrition, while the refugees themselves seemed grateful for the rescue. Marcus Webb and 3 other refugees had been granted permission to serve as interpreters and caretakers for the group. They moved among their fellow survivors with quiet efficiency, distributing food, comforting children, and answering questions from the hegemony crew. It was Dr. Nithara, the ship's medical officer, who first noticed something unusual. "Captain," she reported during the evening shift change, "I need to discuss something with you privately." Vexel received her in his ready room, a small chamber adjacent to the bridge that served as his private office. Dr. Nithara was agitated, her normally composed demeanor showing cracks. "Sir, I've been examining the refugees and there are some anomalies I can't explain." "What kind of anomalies?" "Several of these beings show signs of genetic modification that I've never seen before. Enhanced muscle density, improved cardiovascular efficiency, modified neural pathways that suggest increased reaction times and pattern recognition abilities." Vexul's mandibles clicked in confusion. "Modified by whom? That's what I can't determine." The modifications are subtle, integrated so seamlessly into their basic biology that they appear natural unless you know what to look for. And sir, she paused, consulting her datapad. The human, Webb, shows the most extensive modifications of all. His bone density is 30% higher than baseline human normal. His muscle fibers show signs of controlled enhancement. His brain scans indicate neural pathway development that shouldn't be possible without advanced medical intervention. You're suggesting these refugees are not what they appear to be? I'm suggesting that someone has been conducting very advanced biological research on them. Or they've been conducting it on themselves. Before Vexul could respond, the ship's alarm began to wail. Emergency lights bathed the ready room in red as the captain's communicator crackled to life. "Sir!" It was the voice of his bridge officer, strain evident even through the distortion. "We have a problem. The refugees, they're not in their quarters anymore." Vexul was moving before the sentence was finished. Dr. Nithara close behind. They burst onto the bridge to find chaos. Half his crew was unconscious at their stations while the other half stared at their consoles in bewilderment. "Report," Vexhol barked. "Sir, approximately 10 minutes ago, all our systems began experiencing cascading failures," stammered the tactical officer. "Navigation, weapons, communications, life support, everything started shutting down in sequence." By the time we realized it wasn't a mechanical failure, they were already here. Who was already here? The answer came from behind him. Marcus Webb stepped onto the bridge, no longer the humble refugee, but moving with the predatory grace of a trained soldier. He was followed by 6 other humans, all carrying hegemony weapons taken from the unconscious security personnel. "The species you thought you'd exterminated 5 years ago," Webb said conversationally. His accent had changed, too, the careful, submissive tones of a refugee replaced by the crisp authority of a military officer. Vexel reached for his sidearm, but one of the humans was already pointing a plasma rifle at his chest. The being's movements were inhumanly fast, almost precognitive in their precision. "I wouldn't," the human advised. Dr. Nithara was correct, by the way. "We have been modified. Not by others, but by ourselves. Genetic therapy, cybernetic enhancement, selective breeding for specific traits. We've had 5 years to perfect the techniques." "You're dead," Vexul growled. "Your species is extinct. We watched your homeworld burn." Webb smiled, and it was the most terrifying expression the hegemony captain had ever seen. "Yes, you did. You killed 8 billion of us, but you missed 50,000. And we've been very, very busy." One of the other humans, a woman with the cold eyes of a professional killer, stepped forward. "Captain Webb, ship is secured, all crew accounted for, all systems under our control." "Excellent, Lieutenant Chen." Webb turned back to Vexel. "Yes, Chen. Sarah Chen's daughter. The Admiral sends her regards as Dr. Nithara had been quietly running scans on her medical tricorder. "Sir," she whispered to Vexul, "these readings, they're not entirely human anymore. Neural activity is off the charts. Reaction times that are physically impossible. They've turned themselves into weapons." "Not weapons," Webb corrected, apparently having overheard despite the doctor's whisper. "Weapons are tools used by others. We've turned ourselves into something much more dangerous than that." "What do you want?" Vexul demanded. "Information," Webb replied simply. "Fleet movements, patrol schedules, supply routes, command codes, communication protocols. Everything you know about hegemony military operations in this sector." "I'll never—" "Yes, you will," Webb interrupted. "Because we're not going to torture you or threaten you or do any of the crude things your species would do in our position. We're simply going to ask nicely, and you're going to cooperate." Vexel's mandibles spread in defiance. "And why would I do that?" Webb gestured to one of his companions, who produced a datapad and activated a holographic display. The three-dimensional image showed a hegemony military base bustling with activity. "Base Omega." 9, Webb said conversationally. 7,000 personnel, including the families of senior officers. Established 18 months ago in the former Cathari system, you know, the one your people sterilized for mining rights. The image shifted, showing detailed schematics of the base's defenses, personnel rosters, even the daily schedules of key commanders. "How did you—" Vexul began. "We've been watching you," Webb explained patiently. "Learning your patterns, studying your weaknesses, mapping your entire military infrastructure. Did you know that hegemony security protocols haven't been updated in over 200 years? You've been fighting the same types of enemies for so long that you never considered what might happen if someone actually learned to adapt." The holographic display showed more bases, more fleets, more installations, all mapped in precise detail. "Captain," said Dr. Nithara quietly, "how many of your people survived?" "Enough," Webb replied, "spread across 17 different cell networks, each operating independently. Some focus on intelligence gathering, others on technological development, still others on recruitment and training. We've become very good at convincing other species to join our cause." "What cause?" Vexul asked, though he was beginning to suspect the answer. "Justice," Webb said simply. "You've committed genocide against 68 species over the past 3,000 years. We're going to make sure you answer for every single one." Lieutenant Chen activated another section of the display showing hegemony shipping routes and commercial traffic patterns. "We don't want to rule the galaxy," she explained. "We don't want to conquer territory or establish our own empire. We want something much simpler than that." "Which is?" "Dr. They?" Nithara asked. Webb's smile returned, cold and patient. and utterly implacable. We want you to be afraid. We want every hegemony officer, every government official, every citizen of your empire to go to sleep at night wondering if this will be the night the humans come for them. We want you to understand what it feels like to be helpless, to be hunted, to watch everything you've built crumble around you. The display showed the latest intelligence reports. Hegemony patrol ships found drifting empty, supply convoys that simply vanished, communications networks that suffered mysterious failures at precisely the worst possible moments. You see, Captain, Webb continued, you made one crucial mistake when you destroyed our homeworld. You assumed that because you could kill us, you could defeat us. But humans have never been the strongest or the fastest or the most advanced species in the galaxy. What we are is the most stubbornly, relentlessly, absolutely vindictive species you've ever encountered. He gestured at his companions, all of whom had been moving with mechanical precision throughout the conversation. We don't forget, we don't forgive, and we never, ever stop present. The interrogation of the dominant truth's crew took 3 days. When it was over, the humans had extracted every piece of useful intelligence the hegemony vessel contained. They had detailed fleet movements for the next 6 months, communication codes that wouldn't be changed for another year, and the personal files of over 300 senior hegemony officers. On the 4th day, the crew of the dominant truth woke up drifting in space near a hegemony patrol route. Their ship intact, but their memories of the past week mysteriously fragmented. The last thing any of them remembered clearly was approaching a derelict cargo hauler in the Kepler Nebula. Their official report would describe equipment failures, possible exposure to exotic radiation, and recommended medical evaluation for the entire crew. The incident would be filed, investigated, and eventually forgotten, just another routine mishap in the vast bureaucracy of the hegemony military. But in the depths of space, 17-cell networks of enhanced humans received the intelligence their operatives had gathered. Plans were updated, targets were selected, and the next phase of humanity's patient war moved one step closer to fruition. Admiral Sarah Chen, now 67 years old and bearing scars from a dozen covert operations, reviewed the reports in her hidden command center deep within an asteroid field. Around her, the descendants of Earth worked at stations equipped with technology that seamlessly blended human ingenuity with stolen hegemony advances. "How long?" asked her chief of operations, a woman whose grandfather had died in Earth's final defense. 18 months. Chen replied, studying the tactical displays that showed hegemony positions throughout the galaxy. "Maybe 24 if they adapt faster than we expect. But they won't. You're certain?" Chen smiled with the same cold patience her daughter had inherited. "They spent 3,000 years learning how to commit genocide efficiently. We've spent 5 years learning how to make them pay for it. The question isn't whether we'll succeed, the question is whether any of them will be left alive to surrender when we're finished." High Admiral Kethmo stood in the war room of the Hegemony Supreme Command, his 6 eyes focused on the holographic galaxy map that dominated the center of the chamber. Red markers indicated problem zones, areas where hegemony operations had encountered unexpected difficulties over the past 18 months. "Explain this to me again," he commanded, his translator converting his harsh clicks and chittering into crisp CZ staff. Intelligence Director Vashti, her serpentine form coiled around her workstation, activated the relevant data streams. "Pattern analysis indicates coordinated resistance activities across 17 sectors, High Admiral. Supply convoys attacked with unprecedented precision, patrol vessels found disabled but intact, communication networks experiencing targeted disruptions." The grizzled veteran whose cybernetic implants gleamed dully in the chamber's light. "Organized crime syndicates have been growing bolder." "No," Vashti replied, her forked tongue tasting the air nervously. "Pirates take cargo, hostages, valuable materials. These attacks are different. They target intelligence assets, communication hubs, military personnel with access to classified information. Whoever is doing this wants information, not profit." Kethmo studied the pattern of red markers, his tactical mind automatically searching for strategic connections. The attacks were scattered across thousands of light years, apparently random, but there was something about their timing that troubled him. What about survivors? Witnesses? That's the strangest part, Vashti admitted. In every case, crews are found alive but with selective memory loss. Medical examination reveals no signs of trauma, chemical modification, or technological interference. They simply don't remember what happened during the attacks. Director Nolthan of the Hegemony Science Council, his massive bulk supported by a gravitic chair, leaned forward with interest. Impossible. Memory modification of that precision would require technology we don't possess. Even our best interrogation methods leave traces. Then explain this, Vashti said, activating another data stream. The hologram displayed brain scans from dozens of attack survivors. Neurological analysis shows no anomalies except for temporary disruption of memory engram formation during specific time periods. It's as if their brains simply stopped recording information during the attacks. Kethmos felt a chill run down his chitinous spine. In 300 years of military service, he had never encountered anything like this. The Hegemony's enemies were typically brutal but predictable. They fought with passion, desperation, or greed. This was something else entirely. Theories, he asked? Unknown alien intelligence, suggested General Mordak. Something from outside our sphere of influence. Rogue artificial intelligence, offered Director Knowlton, a self-modifying computer system that's learned to operate independently. Or, Vashti said quietly, something we thought we'd eliminated. Everyone present knew about the Hegemony's recent pacification campaigns, but most of them involved primitive species with limited technological capabilities, nothing that could pose a threat to Hegemony forces. Elaborate, Kethmos ordered. Vashti activated another section of her workstation, displaying a timeline of recent genocidal operations. Cross-referencing attack patterns with our pacification missions over the past 5 years, most of the affected sectors were previously inhabited by species we've eliminated for resource extraction. Revenge fantasies, General Mordak scoffed. Dead species don't launch coordinated military campaigns. The humans aren't dead, Vashti said quietly. The war room erupted in dismissive chittering and clicking. Humans were barely space-capable when the Hegemony first encountered them, using primitive fusion drives and crude weapons systems. The idea that scattered survivors could pose a threat to the galaxy's dominant military force was absurd. Intelligence confirms complete sterilization of the Sol system, General Mordak stated firmly. 8 billion indigenous life forms eliminated. Planetary infrastructure destroyed. Systems stripped for resources. A few refugee ships escaped, but they lacked FTL capability. Even if some survived, they couldn't possibly. 27 patrol vessels disabled or destroyed in the past year, Vashti interrupted, her voice growing stronger. 43 supply convoys attacked. 16 communication stations compromised, all in sectors that were formerly inhabited by species we've eliminated. She paused, accessing classified intelligence files that required High Admiral Kethmos's personal authorization codes. And sir, there's something else. 3 days ago we lost contact with Base Omega 9 in the former Cathari system. Kethmos's attention snapped to full focus. Omega 9 was a major military installation with 7,000 personnel and the latest defensive technologies. It didn't simply lose contact. Define lost contact, he commanded. Complete communication blackout beginning at 14:30 Standard Time, Vashti reported. No distress signals, no automated status reports, no response to direct queries. Long-range sensors show the base is still intact and showing normal power signatures, but we cannot raise them on any frequency. Mechanical failure? Unlikely. Base Omega 9 has 17 independent communication systems with multiple redundancies. The probability of simultaneous failure across all networks is effectively zero. Director Nolthan adjusted his gravitic chair, his massive form shifting uneasily. High Admiral, if the base has been compromised by hostile forces, we need to respond immediately. 7,000 personnel are expendable if it means identifying the threat, Kethmos finished coldly. Director Vashti, I want a full reconnaissance mission to Omega 9. Admiral Zektar's Third Fleet is currently conducting exercises in the marginal territories. Redirect them to investigate. Sir, Vashti hesitated, Admiral Zektar's fleet is the same unit that conducted the Sol System pacification. If these attacks are related to surviving humans, then he's the perfect choice, Kethmos replied. He knows their capabilities better than anyone. 3 days later, Admiral Zektar's Third Fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the former Cathari system. The massive dreadnought Inevitable Conquest led a formation of 12 heavy cruisers and 36 escort vessels, enough firepower to sterilize a planet or destroy an entire enemy fleet. Base Omega 9. This is Admiral Zektar aboard the Inevitable Conquest. He broadcast on emergency frequencies. Respond immediately. Silence. Tactical assessment, Zektar ordered. Base appears fully operational, reported his sensor officer. Power signatures normal, defensive systems active. No signs of battle damage. But, sir, there's no communication traffic at all. A base that size should be generating constant interfacility chatter. Zektar studied the tactical display showing the Hegemony military installation. Base Omega 9 was built into a large asteroid, its surface bristling with weapons emplacements and sensor arrays. It had been designed to control access to the resource-rich Cathari system and serve as a staging area for further expansion. Life signs? He asked. Inconclusive. The base's defensive shielding is interfering with detailed scans. We need to move closer for accurate readings. Sir, interrupted his communications officer, we're receiving a transmission from the base. It's, unusual. Best specify. It's on Admiral Zektar's personal command frequency, the one that should only be known to Supreme Command. Dek felt his mandibles click nervously. His personal frequency was updated weekly and encrypted with codes that changed daily. No unauthorized party should have access to it. Put it through. The main screen activated, showing the interior of Base Omega 9's command center. Everything appeared normal. Control stations, holographic displays, even the Hegemony banner hanging from the ceiling. The only difference was the figure sitting in the commander's chair. It was human. The being appeared to be male, middle-aged by human standards, wearing a perfectly fitted Hegemony officer's uniform complete with the insignia of a base commander. He looked directly at the screen with the calm confidence of someone in complete control of the situation. Admiral Zektar, the human said in perfect trade standard, his voice carrying the authority of high military rank. Thank you for responding so promptly to our invitation. Who are you? Zektar demanded, though he was beginning to suspect the answer. Commander Marcus Webb, formerly of the human cargo vessel New Horizon, currently serving as interim commander of Base Omega 9. The human smiled with the same terrifying expression Zektar had seen in intelligence reports from other attack survivors. I believe we met briefly about 18 months ago, though the circumstances were different then. Other humans moved purposefully between control stations, operating Hegemony equipment with obvious familiarity. In the background, Zektar could see Hegemony personnel going about their duties under human supervision. What have you done with my people? Zektar asked. They're safe, Webb replied. Confused, but safe. We found that temporary memory modification is much more effective than the crude methods your species typically employs. No permanent damage, no trauma, no lasting psychological effects. We don't have that technology. You don't? Webb agreed. We do. 5 years is a long time to develop new capabilities, Admiral, especially when you're properly motivated. The display shifted to show other areas of the base. Hegemony personnel went about their normal routines, apparently unaware that their facility was under hostile control. They interacted normally with human infiltrators who had seamlessly integrated themselves into the base's command structure. How many? Zektar whispered. On the base? About 200 of our people, mixed with your 7,000. Webb consulted a datapad, but you're really asking how many of us survived your genocide. The answer is more than you killed, fewer than you feared. Admiral Zektar's tactical mind was racing through the implications. If humans could infiltrate a major military base without detection, if they possessed technology capable of selective memory modification, if they had the organizational capability to coordinate attacks across multiple sectors, "What do you want?" he asked. "To show you something," Webb replied. "Computer, display tactical overview Omega 7. 7. The screen changed to show a three-dimensional tactical display of Zektar's own fleet. Every ship was tagged with detailed information: class, capabilities, crew complement, current status, even the personal files of senior officers. "Impressive formation," Webb commented conversationally. 12 Devastator-class heavy cruisers, 36 Retribution-class escorts, and of course your flagship, the inevitable Conquest. Total crew complement: 47,863. Current ammunition loadout: 85% of maximum capacity. Estimated fuel reserves, sufficient for 6 months of normal operations or 48 hours of maximum combat operations. The tactical display rotated, showing approach vectors and firing solutions that should have been impossible for anyone outside the fleet to calculate. "How are you?" Zektar began. "Getting this information?" Webb finished. "Admiral, you've been so focused on the obvious threat. Armed ships, military bases, conventional attacks, that you never considered the possibility that we might already be here." The camera shifted again, this time showing a close-up of Webb's uniform. The insignia was perfect, the fabric authentic hegemony military issue. But there was something about the human's eyes that made Zekar's blood run cold. "We've been aboard your ships for months," Webb said quietly. "Maintenance personnel, medical staff, communication technicians, all the people who keep your fleets running but whom your officers never really notice. We've learned your languages, studied your customs, perfected our surgical techniques until we can pass for any species in your empire." The implications hit Zektar like a physical blow. If humans had infiltrated the hegemony military at the operational level, if they had access to classified information and command systems, "Computer," Webb called out, "execute Protocol 77 Alpha." Throughout Zektar's fleet, alarms began to sound. On the bridge of the inevitable Conquest, control panels flickered and died. The main tactical display showed system failures cascading through every ship in the formation. "Navigation offline," reported his helmsman. "Weapons systems unresponsive. Communication array showing multiple faults." "What have you done?" Zektar roared. "Demonstrated a point," Webb replied calmly. "Your ships aren't destroyed, Admiral. Your crews aren't injured. Your weapons aren't permanently damaged. But you're currently dead in space, unable to maneuver, unable to communicate with Supreme Command, and unable to defend yourselves." The camera angle widened to show the entire command center of Base Omega 9. The humans moved with mechanical efficiency between control stations, monitoring the disabled fleet with professional competence. "We could destroy you right now," Webb continued. "Base Omega 9's weapons are more than sufficient to eliminate your entire fleet while it's helpless. But that's not our objective." "Then what is?" Webb stood up from the commander's chair, moving with the predatory grace that Zekar had noticed in intelligence reports about human survivors. "Our objective is to send a message to the Hegemony Supreme Command, a message about the consequences of genocide, about what happens when you murder entire species and think there won't be any payback." The display changed once more, showing a star map of Hegemony space. Hundreds of red markers indicated military installations, supply depots, communication hubs, and administrative centers. "Every red marker represents a hegemony facility that we've infiltrated," Webb explained. "Every base, every ship, every command center in 17 sectors. We have people in your government, your military, your intelligence services. We know your plans before your own commanders do." Zektar stared at the map in growing horror. The red markers covered nearly a third of hegemony space, including some of their most secure installations. "You see, Admiral," Webb continued, "humans have one advantage that your species never considered. We're very, very good at pretending to be something we're not. We spent our entire evolutionary history learning to be social chameleons, adapting to different environments, different cultures, different belief systems." He gestured at the tactical display showing Zektar's disabled fleet. Your ships will be restored to full functionality in 6 hours. Your crews will remember nothing unusual about this encounter except for routine equipment malfunctions and standard maintenance procedures. You'll file a report about temporary system failures, and life will continue as normal. But now you know we're here. Now you know we're watching. Now you know that every time you go to sleep, every time you issue an order, every time you make a decision that affects human interests, we'll be there to judge whether you deserve to wake up the next morning. Webb sat back down in the commander's chair, his expression shifting to something that resembled pity. Admiral, in 5 years we've learned everything about your species. Your history, your psychology, your fears, your predators, but you're lazy predators. You've been the apex species for so long that you've forgotten what it feels like to be prey. The camera zoomed in on Webb's face, showing eyes that held depths of patient, methodical hatred that made Zektar's skin crawl. We're going to teach you. Navigation, weapons, communications, everything functioned normally. The crew reported routine maintenance issues that had been resolved through standard procedures. Admiral Zektar filed his official report as a Class C equipment malfunction requiring follow-up investigation. But in his private log, encrypted with his personal codes and stored in his personal quarters, he recorded a very different assessment. The humans were no longer an extinct species to be forgotten. They had become something far worse, a patient, methodical, utterly implacable enemy that could strike anywhere at any time without warning. And they had made it clear that the war was just beginning. In the depths of space, aboard hidden bases scattered throughout 17 sectors, the descendants of Earth read Admiral Zektar's private log within hours of its creation. They smiled their cold, patient smiles and continued their preparations. Phase 1 was complete. The hegemony now knew they existed. Phase 2 would teach them what that meant. High Admiral Kethmos had not slept properly in 3 months. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Admiral Zektar's private log entries, the impossible tactical displays, the humans sitting calmly in a hijacked hegemony command center. The official report spoke of equipment malfunctions and routine maintenance issues, but the classified intelligence painted a very different picture. The humans were everywhere. "Status report," he commanded as he entered the Supreme Command War Room for the 4th time that day. The holographic galaxy map now showed far more red markers than blue, each one representing a hegemony facility where unusual incidents had been reported. Intelligence Director Vashti had grown visibly thinner over the past weeks, her serpentine form coiled tightly around her workstation as she processed an endless stream of disturbing reports. 73 confirmed infiltration events in the past month, she reported, her forked tongue flicking nervously. Communication blackouts, missing intelligence files, personnel reporting lost time and memory gaps. But sir, she paused, accessing files that required the highest security clearances. It's getting worse. The holographic display zoomed in on the hegemony's core systems, the most heavily defended, most secure installations in the Empire. They're not just infiltrating frontier bases anymore, Vashti continued. We have reports from the Naval Academy on Primaris, the Central Intelligence Hub on Nexus Prime, even the administrative capital on Hegemonia itself. General Mordak, his cybernetic implants clicking more frequently as his stress levels rose, studied the tactical implications with growing alarm. How many of our personnel could be compromised? How do we distinguish between loyal citizens and human infiltrators? That's the problem, admitted Director Nulthen, his massive bulk shifting uneasily in his gravitic chair. Medical scans show no anomalies. DNA analysis is inconclusive. Humans share enough genetic markers with 12 other species to make identification difficult. Psychological evaluation reveals nothing suspicious. If they are among us, they're perfectly integrated. High Admiral Kethmos felt the weight of command pressing down on his chitinous shoulders. In 300 years of military service, he had faced rebellions, alien invasions, and civil wars. But this was different. This was an enemy that could be anyone, anywhere, at any time. "Recommendations?" he asked. "Martial law," General Mordak said immediately. "Lock down all critical installations." restrict personnel movement, implement mandatory genetic screening for all security positions. Impossible, Vashti objected. The hegemony spans 11,000 systems with trillions of citizens. The logistical requirements alone would cripple our economy, Marco asked. Before Vashti could answer, every screen in the war room flickered and died. Emergency lighting cast the chamber in red shadows as the senior leadership of the hegemony military found themselves sitting in darkness. "Security alert," General Mordock barked, reaching for his communicator. "I want a full system diagnostic immediately." But when the screens came back online 30 seconds later, they displayed something that made every being in the room freeze with terror. The holographic galaxy map had been replaced by a simple message in trade standard. "Good evening, High Admiral Kethmos. We need to talk." "How?" whispered Director Nulthan. "This facility is buried 3 kilometers underground. The computer systems are isolated from all external networks. Access requires DNA verification, retinal scans, and quantum encryption codes that change every 60 seconds. The message changed. Dr. Elizabeth Warren sends her regards. She particularly enjoyed studying your security protocols during her 6-month assignment as a research consultant in your technology division." Dr. Elizabeth Warren was the human xenobiologist who had been aboard the refugee ship New Horizon. She should have been dead for 5 years, floating in the void between stars in a primitive fusion-powered vessel. "Impossible," he breathed. The display shifted to show a video feed of a woman in her 70s, gray-haired but alert, sitting in what appeared to be a laboratory filled with advanced equipment. She wore a simple white coat, and her expression carried the patient authority of a senior scientist. "Hello, Admiral," she said warmly, as if greeting an old colleague. "I hope you'll forgive the intrusion, but we needed to demonstrate a point about your security arrangements." "You're dead," Kethmos said to the screen. "Your species is extinct." "Yes, you did try very hard to make that true. 8 billion of my people murdered in a single day. I watched from space as you burned my homeworld to ash and slag. I held crying children who would never see their parents again." The camera angle widened to show the laboratory more clearly. Human technicians worked at stations equipped with technology that seamlessly blended familiar designs with innovations that shouldn't have been possible. "But you made a mistake, Admiral. You assumed that because you could kill us, you could defeat us. You never considered what might happen if the survivors decided to dedicate their lives to returning the favor." General Mordock stepped forward. "What do you want?" "Justice," Dr. Warren replied simply. "For 68 species that your empire has eliminated over the past 3,000 years. For trillions of beings who died so that you could expand your territory and extract their resources." The display changed to show historical records: worlds burning, cities falling, entire civilizations reduced to mining operations and agricultural projects. The Kethari Archipelago, the Sorth Collective, the Yeon Republic, the Altarian Federation. Dr. Warren's voice grew harder with each name. 68 genocides, trillions of murders, and you thought there would never be any consequences. "What consequences?" Kethmos demanded. "Your 50,000 refugees scattered across the galaxy. Even with advanced technology, you cannot possibly threaten the hegemony." Warren's expression shifted to something that resembled pity. "Admiral, you're still thinking like the species that committed those genocides. You're thinking in terms of fleets and armies and conventional warfare. You're thinking like predators who measure strength in terms of raw power." The camera zoomed in on her face, showing eyes that held depths of patient, methodical intelligence. "We're not predators anymore. We're something much more dangerous than that. We're an immune response." The display changed once more, showing a biological diagram of a virus attacking healthy cells. "When an organism is infected by a pathogen," Dr. Warren explained in the calm tone of a university lecturer, "the immune system doesn't try to overpower the infection through brute force. It learns to recognize the pathogen, adapts to counter its methods, and then systematically eliminates it from the host organism." The diagram shifted to show immune cells surrounding and destroying the viral infection. "We've spent 5 years studying your species, Admiral. learning your language, your culture, your psychology, your technology. We've identified your weaknesses, mapped your infrastructure, and positioned ourselves at every critical point in your society. The holographic display returned to the galaxy map, but now the red markers were moving, hundreds of them spreading throughout hegemony space like a viral infection consuming healthy tissue. You see, the beauty of an immune response is that it doesn't need to be larger or stronger than the pathogen. It just needs to be more intelligent, more adaptable, and completely dedicated to its purpose. Intelligence Director Vashti had been running calculations on her workstation. The pattern of infiltration events, it's not random. They're targeting specific installations in a precise sequence. Correct, Dr. 2, Warren confirmed. Communication hubs first to control information flow. Supply depots second to disrupt logistics. Command centers third to compromise decision-making capabilities. We've been systematically dismantling your empire's nervous system while you've been looking for conventional military threats.
This is impossible, General Mordak protested.
Even with perfect intelligence, 50,000 individuals cannot control an empire of trillions. We're not controlling it, Dr. Warren corrected gently. We're killing it, slowly, methodically, invisibly. Your own citizens are doing most of the work for us. The display showed internal hegemony reports, supply shortages, communication failures, administrative confusion, growing paranoia among military personnel who no longer trusted their own colleagues. When you can't trust your intelligence networks, you make poor strategic decisions. When your supply lines are unreliable, your military effectiveness degrades. When your personnel are afraid of each other, their operational efficiency collapses. High Admiral Kethmos realized with growing horror that Dr. Warren was describing exactly what had been happening to hegemony operations over the past year. The mysterious equipment failures, the missing intelligence files, the paranoia spreading through the ranks. It hadn't been random incidents. It had been a coordinated campaign to destroy the empire from within. How many? He asked quietly. How many of us are there? How many of your people are really our people? How many of your systems are under our control? Dr. Warren smiled with the same terrifying expression that had become humanity's signature. Admiral, those are the wrong questions. Then what are the right questions? The right question is, how long do you want this to continue? The display shifted to show projections, mathematical models that predicted the complete collapse of hegemony military effectiveness within 18 months. Social breakdown within 3 years. We can accelerate the process or slow it down, depending on your species' willingness to cooperate with our objectives. Which are? Director Nelthan asked. Warren replied, full restitution for the worlds you've destroyed, and a guarantee that the hegemony will never again commit genocide against any sentient species. And if we refuse, Dr. Warren's expression didn't change, but something in her eyes grew cold and patient and utterly implacable. Then you'll discover what happens when an entire species dedicates itself to the complete and total destruction of another species, not through warfare, Admiral, through patient, methodical, absolutely relentless elimination. The video feed ended and the war room's normal displays returned as if nothing had happened, but every being present understood that everything had changed. Sir, Vashti said quietly, our security protocols are completely compromised. If they can access this facility, they can access anywhere in the Empire. And if they've been infiltrating our systems for 5 years, General Mordak added, they know everything. Our military plans, our economic data, our political structure, everything. High Admiral Kethmos stood in silence for several minutes, his tactical mind processing the implications of what they had just witnessed. The humans weren't waging war in any conventional sense. They had transformed themselves into something unprecedented, a species-level immune response dedicated to eliminating what they perceived as a galactic pathogen. Options? He finally asked. Negotiate, Director Knowlton suggested. If their objective is justice rather than conquest, perhaps we can reach an accommodation. Surrender, you mean, General Mordak said bitterly. Survival, Nulthan corrected. The alternative appears to be the complete collapse of our civilization. Kethmos studied the tactical displays, trying to find some weakness in the human strategy, some vulnerability that could be exploited. But Dr. Curtin, Warren had been correct. They weren't fighting like any enemy the hegemony had ever faced. They had made themselves into something that was simultaneously everywhere and nowhere, something that could destroy an empire without firing a shot. Sir, Vashti interrupted his thoughts, there's something else. Intelligence reports from our remaining agents in the field indicate that the humans aren't working alone anymore. Explain, survivors from the species we've eliminated over the past 50 years, scattered populations, refugee communities, descendants of the worlds we've destroyed for resource extraction. They're organizing, Admiral, coming together under human leadership. The holographic display showed new intelligence data, communication intercepts, movement patterns, resource allocations that suggested a growing alliance of species united by their hatred of the hegemony. How many species? Kethmos asked. At least 12 confirmed, possibly as many as 20, all of them with personal reasons to want the hegemony destroyed. General Mordak's cybernetic implants clicked rapidly as he processed the tactical implications. If they're coordinating resistance activities across multiple sectors, if they have access to our intelligence networks, if they've been infiltrating our installations for years, then we're not facing 50,000 human refugees, Kethmos finished quietly. We're facing a coalition of every species we've wronged, led by the one species that has proven capable of learning from defeat. The war room fell silent except for the hum of electronics and the distant sound of ventilation systems. Every being present understood that they were witnessing something unprecedented in galactic history: the transformation of genocide's victims into genocide's architects. Sir, Vashti said finally, what are your orders? High Admiral Kethmos looked around the war room at the faces of his senior staff. Beings who had spent their careers implementing the hegemony's expansion through systematic extermination of competing species. For the first time in 3 centuries, he found himself wondering whether their victims had deserved to die. Contact Supreme Chancellor Vorthak, he said quietly. Tell him we need to discuss the possibility of diplomatic solutions to our current security challenges. Sir? General Mordak asked.
Are you suggesting we negotiate with terrorists? Kethmos studied the galaxy map where red markers continued to spread through hegemony space like a malignant infection.
But for the first time, he was beginning to understand that the infection might not be malignant at all. It might be the galaxy's natural immune response to a species that had spent 3 millennia poisoning it. No, General, he said finally. I'm suggesting we negotiate with the consequences of our own actions. Supreme Chancellor Vorthak stood on the observation deck of the Hegemony Palace, his ancient form silhouetted against the sprawling cityscape of Hegemonia Prime. At 400 years old, he had ruled the empire for longer than some species had existed. He had overseen the expansion that had spread hegemony influence across 11,000 systems, had ordered the elimination of obstacles to progress, had built the greatest civilization the galaxy had ever known. Now he watched that civilization crumble. In the streets below, demonstrations had become riots. Citizens who had once felt secure under hegemony protection now lived in constant fear of the invisible humans who could be anyone, anywhere, at any time. Economic systems that had functioned smoothly for centuries were collapsing as supply chains failed and communication networks suffered mysterious disruptions. Military units reported to duty only to find their orders countermanded by superior officers who may or may not be who they claimed to be. Chancellor, came a voice from behind him. Vorthak didn't turn around. After ruling for 3 centuries, he had developed an instinct for recognizing when someone was about to deliver news he didn't want to hear. The military situation? He asked. High Admiral Kethmos requests an immediate audience, replied his aide, a nervous young hegemony bureaucrat whose career had been built on the Empire's seemingly eternal stability. He says it's urgent. Vorthak finally turned, studying the aide's frightened expression. How urgent? He used the phrase existential threat to the Empire, sir. The Chancellor's mandibles clicked in resignation. He had been expecting this conversation for months, ever since Intelligence Director Vashti had begun reporting impossible infiltration events throughout hegemony space. He had hoped that the military could contain the threat, that the Empire's vast resources and technological advantages would prove sufficient to deal with whatever enemy they were facing. He had been wrong. "Send him in," Vorthak commanded. High Admiral Kethmos entered the Chancellor's private chambers with the bearing of a soldier who had accepted defeat. His normally immaculate uniform was rumpled, his chitinous skin showed signs of stress, and his 6 eyes held the look of someone who had seen something that fundamentally challenged his understanding of the universe. "Report," Vorthak ordered. "The humans have presented us with a formal proposal," Kethmos said without preamble, activating a portable holographic projector. "They call it the Restitution Accords." The hologram displayed a document written in perfect trade standard, formatted according to traditional galactic diplomatic protocols. But the content was unlike anything in the Empire's history. "They want us to confess," Kethmos continued, "publicly acknowledge 68 acts of genocide committed over the past 3,000 years. They want full compensation paid to surviving populations of eliminated species. They want our military reduced to defensive capabilities only, with all expansion activities permanently ceased." Vorthak studied the terms with the analytical mind that had made him one of the galaxy's most successful rulers. "And in return, they stop the systematic destruction of our empire and allow us to continue existing as a significantly reduced political entity." "Unacceptable, Chancellor," Kethmos said quietly. "I don't think we have a choice." Vorthak's mandibles spread in the threatening display that had cowed political opponents for centuries. "The hegemony does not negotiate with terrorists. We do not confess to crimes we have not committed. We do not pay reparations to species that no longer exist."
"Sir, with respect, those species do still exist."
"Not in their original numbers, perhaps, but the humans have been gathering survivors, refugees, descendants of our pacification campaigns. They've built a coalition that spans at least 20 species, all of them united by their hatred of us." The hologram shifted to show intelligence reports, hidden bases, supply networks, coordination protocols that revealed the scope of the alliance humanity had built among the hegemony's former victims. "More importantly," Kethmos continued, "they've demonstrated capabilities that our best scientists say should be impossible. Memory modification technology that leaves no traces. Infiltration techniques that can penetrate our most secure facilities. Intelligence networks that know our plans before we make them. Then we adapt," Vorthak said firmly. "We upgrade our security, develop countermeasures, eliminate the threat through superior firepower." "Chancellor," Kethmos said with the patience of someone who had already considered and discarded every conventional military option, "yesterday morning, every computer system in the Naval Academy on Primaris displayed the same message for exactly 60 seconds. The children of murdered worlds are watching." When our technicians investigated, they found that the message had been embedded in the core programming for over 2 years, waiting for the right activation signal. The Naval Academy was where the Empire trained its future military leaders, where the most sensitive strategic information was stored and analyzed. "If they could place that message," Kethmos continued, "they could have planted anything. Viruses, logic bombs, backdoors, data extraction protocols. Our entire military communication network may be compromised." The hologram changed again, showing a galaxy map dotted with red markers that now covered nearly 70% of hegemony space. "This morning, we lost contact with the 3rd, 7th, and 12th fleets. Not destroyed, lost. They're still out there, still following their patrol routes, but they're no longer responding to commands from Supreme Command. Their crews report normal operations, but they seem to have forgotten that they're supposed to be taking orders from us." 3 entire fleets represented nearly 200 ships and over 1 million personnel. If humans had somehow gained control of that much firepower, are they using our own forces against us? "We don't know," Kethmos admitted. "The affected ships aren't attacking anyone, aren't deviating from their assigned missions. They're just not ours anymore." The Chancellor moved to his private communication console, a device that connected him directly to intelligence services throughout the Empire. But when he activated it, the screen displayed only static. Communication failure? He asked. Selective information control, Kethmos corrected. Our intelligence networks are still functional, but they're only providing information that the humans want us to have. We can communicate with some facilities, but not others. We can access some databases, but not others. We can issue some orders, but not others. Vorthek felt the weight of 3 centuries pressing down on his ancient shoulders. He had built an empire through strength, determination, and the willingness to eliminate obstacles to progress. But this enemy was unlike anything he had ever faced. They weren't trying to defeat the hegemony through conventional warfare. They were slowly, methodically, invisibly transforming it into something else. "What do you recommend?" he asked quietly. "Accept their terms," Kethmos replied without hesitation. "The alternative is the complete collapse of our civilization within 12 months. Based on what analysis? The hologram shifted to show economic projections, supply chain disruptions, communication failures, and military defections. The pattern was clear. The hegemony was dying from within, consumed by an enemy that had made itself indispensable to the empire's basic functions. They're not trying to conquer us, Chancellor. They're performing surgery on us, carefully, precisely, systematically removing our ability to commit genocide while leaving the rest of our society intact." Vorthak studied the projections with the analytical mind that, humanity's retaliation for genocide. Now you encounter the real monsters. Best HFY Stories. HFY Sci-Fi Stories.